Well, good morning. This morning I want to talk a bit about motivation, why we do the things that we do. Again, as the people of God, we recognize that we are called to live life every day in every part in an intimate and ongoing relationship with Jesus. But why do we do that? What is it that moves us to continually give our lives over to Him and to choose to honor Him and to walk with Him? Over the course of the last couple of months, I've had this sort of tension, this stirring in my soul about the reasons why we walk with God. Again, this morning I recognize that not all of my thoughts are fully fleshed out, so I want to just give you some grace this morning. I'm just kind of inviting you into a journey of some of the things that I'm processing around this. Because I think as we look at the scriptures, there are 4 critical reasons why we choose to walk with Jesus, to follow Him, to do the things that we do in relationship with God. And I think for 2 of these reasons, we understand them pretty well. And for the other 2, I think there might be some immaturity in our understanding. There might be some significant capacity for us to grow and to move and to go further in our relationship with Jesus as we understand these motivations differently. So in the first motivation I think we're really growing to understand is that we do what we do because of the intensity of the love of God. We talked about this a bit 2 weeks ago when the Apostle Paul says, it's Christ's love that compels us. We recognize that the power of God's love is so deep, it's so consuming, it's so awe-inspiring that it moves us forward to walk out in relationship with Jesus. When we think about the God and the creator of the universe, that when He saw us, even warring against Him and sinning against Him and doing whatever it is that we chose to do and wanted to do, even against Him, that He would suffer and die for us. When we see that and know it, it changes us. The Apostle John reminds us that we love because He first loved us. It transforms our souls and it changes us down and through. And I think that as a church, we've come a really long way. We're continuing to grow to understand the immensity of the love of God for us, and this changes us. This motivates us to walk with Him and to follow Him faithfully. And the second reason I think that we maybe understand the best is that we choose to follow Jesus because we just know that it's best for us. And again, the scriptures are really clear about this. There's no doubt when you read through the Bible that explains over and over and over again that is the very best thing that we could ever possibly do is to walk out life in intimate relationship with God. As we do, it frees us from the fear and the intensity of hell. It moves us into an ongoing life in relationship with God in heaven and eternity forever and ever and ever. And we get to experience life with God in the here and now that gives us peace and joy and hope and meaning and significance and satisfaction. There's so much that's good in our walk and relationship with God, and it should motivate us to move forward. Again, as Christians, we're not Stoics. We don't teach or believe that we shouldn't ever want anything for ourselves. The Bible doesn't teach that. But it invites us to recognize that it is just so much better to follow God than to experience life in any other way. And this does and this should continue to motivate us. And the third reason, which is one that I think we struggle with a little bit, is that we should follow God, we should be motivated to work with Him because of a healthy fear of God. And not a dread or an overwhelming, consuming terror of Him, but a really honest, healthy respect for the might and the power and the wonder of who He is. And someday we're going to have a really good conversation about that when we're all a little bit more ready for it. But today what I want to talk about is the fourth reason, that we should walk with God and follow Him because of the glory of God. As I read through the scriptures, I keep being struck by the fact that over and over and over again, so many times the people of God and Jesus and even the Father Himself are acted and motivated by the idea of the glory of God. Over and over again, we see the people of God choosing to make choices to walk with God and to follow Him, not because it's in their best interest, and not even out of love for God, but out of this deep desire that God would be glorified, that He would be honored as He is entitled to be honored in the fullness of what He is worthy of. And I think this is really important for us for a couple of reasons. Again, I think if we were to walk through our Christian life and our experience, knowing that we are deeply loved by God and knowing that it's better for us, but only if those were our only 2 motivations, I think we maybe run some significant risks. If we chose to live our life with God for only those 2 reasons, I think we could easily make our relationship with Jesus about ourselves. We could possibly slip into a perspective where we view ourselves at the center of everything, at the core of all of the universe and all that is, and then it's just one small step from there to a really terrifying kind of idolatry, where we view God as simply a mechanism to get what we want. And I'm a little bit frightened in my own heart and mind how quickly I can move into that space. How quickly my heart can shift from wanting to honor God and delight in Him and to serve Him really well to thinking of engaging with God simply to get what I want. And if we make life about our dreams, our goals, our ambitions, our desires, at the core of who we are, we slip into this frightening movement of idolatry. We totally miss Jesus' call to come and to die to ourselves so we can fully live in Him and for Him. And if we do this, if we begin to live a me-centered life, our life begins to disintegrate from the inside out. Because the truth of the matter is that you and I are not large enough or strong enough or big enough to hold the weight of significance. If we try and make our lives about ourselves, we simply end up feeling empty and uncertain. It's interesting that a number of current secular studies have also come up with this idea where they've said that one of the critical factors in our current mental health crisis in North America comes from the fact that we don't have anything to live for. There's nothing beyond ourselves greater or more important or more significant, because if we do just live for ourselves, it leads to a tremendous amount of fear, because everything is up to me. I have to find a way to make all of my life work out the way that it is. If there's nothing beyond my own existence, it's a terrifying prospect to think that I have to try and find a way to make my life feel meaningful and significant and valuable enough, and this leads to anxiety and fear, and it is just depressing. And so the scriptures would call us to a different perspective. They would remind us certainly that we can and we should be motivated by the intensity of the love of God for us, and we can and we should be motivated by the fact that it is just better for us. But we also need this really deep understanding of motivation, that we would be motivated by the glory of God, the wonder of who He is, and a desire that He would be honored in the ways that He is worthy of. And so what I want to do this morning is I don't want to minimize any of the other two motivations, but I want us to do as a church is to plant another foundation stone this week before we start a whole new ministry year next week. Because I think if we can draw these motivations together, it will strengthen us. It will protect us from error. And it will help us to choose to pursue God even in spaces where it's costly and where it's difficult and where things seem uncertain. And so for our time this morning, I want us to just take the space to dive into this current space because it's really critical and it's important for us. A friend, Jonathan Griffith, in a recent book wrote, "I want to suggest that if we do not understand and grasp the truth that God is truly glorious, we are in grave danger of misdirecting the affection of our hearts, the ambition of our dreams, the energy of our lives. The Christian life is driven and inspired in a very real sense by a God-given vision of His great glory." And so let's dive in together. So what is the glory of God? It's a bit of an abstract concept. But the two words used to describe God's glory in the Old Testament and in the New Testament both have this connotation of weight, of heaviness. And if you think about the reality of God, God is full of power. He is all-powerful. He is beautiful beyond comparison. He is wise beyond our comprehension. He is more creative than we could ever possibly know. He is full of all love and all holiness, all justice and all mercy, all compassion and all honor. And we could go on all morning. He is full of everything that is good and right and whole, and there is just weight to His existence. And this weight can feel overwhelming. For example, in the Christmas story, when we read that the angels appeared to the shepherds and the glory of God shone all around them and they were terrified, it tells us that the shepherds saw some glimpse of the weight of who God is. They caught one small glimpse of the wonder of who He is and all of His power and His majesty and His mercy and His love and His justice and His strength. And they were just simply overcome. As we read through the scriptures, we see so many beautiful and powerful images of the wonder and the glory of God, particularly in visions of who He is. And in one particular vision, Isaiah chapter 6, I want us just to camp out there for a few minutes. It says these words, And again, if you want to, just close your eyes and hear this out. Just if you want to be able to imagine what this looks like, if that feels uncomfortable, there's no pressure. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne. And the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphs flew to me with a live coal in his hand that he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. And isn't this a fantastic vision? Isn't this a beautiful description of a glimpse of the wonder and the weight and the glory of God? Here's Isaiah and all the people of God in a really hard space of transition. King Uzziah, who had been a fairly good king, has just died. And it must have seemed like there was uncertainty in the kingdom. What would the next king be like? Would he continue to lead them closer to God? Would he pull them away? There's huge rumblings from the nations of Assyria and all kinds of empires moving all around them. What on earth is going on in their world? And in the middle of this, Isaiah sees a vision of the glory of God, high and exalted, seated powerfully on a throne. God is unmovable. He is overwhelming in his strength and his glory and his power. No matter what's happening or what nations are raging all around Isaiah, God is sovereignly ruling and in control of absolutely everything. And in the midst of this, he's surrounded by these huge, powerful beings that just keep crying out of his glory. They cover their faces because they cannot handle the fact of looking directly into the wonder and the might of God moment by moment and second by second. But even still, constantly, in an ongoing way, they keep crying out, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. Because in every single second, it's new and it's compelling and it's overwhelming. And every single second, as they see the wonder and the majesty and the glory of God, they cannot help themselves but crying out desperately at the wonder of who he is, that everything is full of his glory, that he rules and reigns supreme. He is separate from all evil and darkness. He is wondrous beyond imagination. You kind of get this sense when you read the visions of God that everything that we have ever seen that's powerful or overwhelming or beautiful or wise or wonderful or compelling is just some small shadowy reflection of the wonder of what we get to behold in the presence of God. And it moves and it shapes and it changes the people who encounter it. When Isaiah sees God like this, he is overcome. He says, Woe to me, I am ruined. I am dead. I am done. I am finished. I cannot handle the weight of what I am experiencing. And Isaiah just cries out, confessing all of his sin and the sin of the people around him, because he realizes he's just so unworthy to even be seen or known or in the presence of this wondrously perfect and beautiful and holy God. And when God asks, Whom shall I send and who will go for us? Who will do this really difficult task? Isaiah can't help but respond, Here I am. Would you send me? Because regardless of how difficult the task or how thankless it might be or how hard it might be or how costly it might be, when Isaiah sees the image of the glory and the wonder of God, it doesn't matter. He would do absolutely anything to worship him and to serve him. And we see this pattern lived out over and over and over again through the scriptures. As people catch an image of the glory of God, they are consumed. They are overwhelmed. They are undone. The Apostle John, who is the one who reclined with Jesus at the table at the Last Supper, who knew Jesus maybe more closely than anybody else, when he catches a vision of the glory of Christ in eternity, he falls down as if he was dead, simply overcome by the weight of all that he sees. And over and over and over through the scriptures, we see this pattern. As people see the wonder of God, they can't help but cry out. They can't help but worship. They can't help but deal with whatever might possibly be in their life because they just want more of him. They want to align their lives as fully as they possibly can with the goodness and the beauty and the wonder of this God that they are seeing because he just deserves it. It just draws it out of them. And I wonder if it's a little bit like riding a roller coaster. Just bear with me. So when I went on a roller coaster with my kids, you kind of get on, you're kind of starting to play it a little bit cool, but as the roller coaster gets going, the power and the momentum, the inertia and the intensity of it just kind of takes over, and you just can't help but go like, wah! You can't play it cool. It just comes out of you. You just scream. There's no way to keep yourself from it. And if something that's built by us, it's a few gears and lines and wood or metal, can draw this kind of response out of us, what do you think it would be like to come face to face with the creator and sustainer of the universe? It would just instantaneously draw out of us awe and worship and a full and an utter and complete submission. We would do anything and everything that we possibly could to align ourselves with him and with the wonder of his glory, because he's just worthy of it. He is so far beyond anything that we could possibly imagine. And he gives us this really interesting gift. You see, God's glory is constant and it is sure, it's perfect in every single moment. But God veils his glory from us in some way to give us the capacity to choose. Do we want to honor and glorify him with our lives or not? Our lives can't diminish his glory, but he gives us this opportunity, this choice. How do we want to respond to him? But you see, this is what we were created for. There's this interesting statement in the Westminster Confession of Faith that says the chief end of humanity, or the entire purpose of life, the meaning of life, if you will, is that we would glorify God and enjoy him forever. You just think about that for a moment. This is the meaning of life. This is the purpose for which we were intended. This is where our souls find their deepest satisfaction and we become whole, is in bringing God glory and delighting and enjoying the wonder of who he is. And on some level, we all know the truth of this. There is this longing, there is this aching, there is this cry in the core of our being to be close to God and to see him, to know him, to behold his wonder, to in some way to be connected with this one who endures forever and ever and is sovereign over all things. We long for this. But it causes me to wonder, where have we lost sight of the glory of God? Because I wonder about my life and I wonder about your life. If we were to sit down and someone was to take an objective look at my life and yours, what would they say is our ultimate goal? What would they say is the purpose for which we are living? Would they say in the decisions that we make that our ultimate goal is our comfort or our security or our success? Would they say that it's a happy family? Would they say that our ultimate goal is that we would be strong and powerful and amazing or beautiful? If people looked at my life and yours, what would they say is our ultimate goal? And so I wonder, where have we lost sight, and where have I lost sight of the magnitude and the wonder of who he is? I think it's critical, and I think it's important that we are motivated by God's intense love for us, and that we're motivated by the fact that it's better for us to follow him. But are we captivated by the glory of God in such a way that we would do anything and everything it took to align our lives as fully as possible with his glory, so that our lives could proclaim his praise? When we engage in spaces of worship together, is there this consuming passion, this desperate longing to cry out of the goodness of who he is? In our day in and day out decision making, do we consider the wonder of his presence? Or do we miss it? And I think this is a moment of unique challenge for us. Because the wonder and the truth and the goodness of the glory of God is meant to impact every single part of our lives and our priority and how we live our life in every part. And we could talk about this probably all day, but I just want to focus on one particular area of this and kind of let the Holy Spirit kind of move out from there. And I think if we rightly understood the glory of God, it would revolutionize our perspective on sin. Say if we take sin all the way back to the beginning, before we've even sinned, in the idea of temptation. I think if we could see the glory of God rightly, when a moment of temptation comes, I think we would see it as nothing other than an opportunity. I think when a moment of temptation comes, we would say, this is a chance for me to glorify God. This is a chance for me to say, I don't want any of that. I don't need any of that. Because what I have in Jesus is so lasting and pure and good and true and satisfying, I don't even need to consider, do I want that? And in that response, we choose to honor God. We choose to give him glory through our lives, to praise the wonder of who he is, that he's so much better than any of that. And on the flip side, in a moment of temptation, we would recognize that if I choose to give in to that, what I'm really saying is I want that more than I want God. In these moments, this matters more to me than God matters to me. I think if we could see the glory of God rightly, it would help us to recognize our temptations, not just as something that we might want to do, but it is this capacity for a terrible exchange. Either to choose to honor and to glorify God, or to choose to say that he's not the most important thing in our life in this particular moment. You see, I think what happens to me and to you very often is that when temptation comes, we think about sin maybe as getting away with something, particularly if we don't get caught. And for some of us, I think we think about our sins as maybe this secret hidden treasure that we have somewhere that we just keep getting to get away with this thing. But the scriptures remind us that's not really what sin is like at all. When we sin, it's like we're moving away from the very best meal presented to us on a table, and we're going into the kitchen, we're pulling out the garbage can, and we're finding whatever we can in there, we're chewing on something out of there. Because it's just degrading and it's damaging, it's harmful. In Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul describes this to us in a vivid kind of horror. Speaking of humanity, the Apostle Paul says, although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings and birds and animals and reptiles. And Paul goes on to explain this terrifying reality that when we give in to sin, we are exchanging the glory of the immortal God for something created that can never, ever satisfy. We are changing wisdom and insight and satisfaction for things that will degrade us and damage us and harm us and bring destruction into our lives. He explains to us that we never, ever get away with anything when we sin. But even the act of sin itself is the beginning of the punishment for the sin. Let me explain it like this. Say, for example, we give into idolatry. Whether it's idolatry of worshiping an image made to look like something created, or it's idolatry where we're living our life centered around money or comfort or pleasure or our own satisfaction or people's good opinion of us. Whenever we live for something other than God, we are exchanging the glory of the immortal God and a life lived around him and in desperate pursuit of him for something that can never, ever satisfy. And it just leaves us empty and longing and wanting more. Or say, for example, we give into some kind of sexual sin. What we are doing in that is saying that we want this thing that will eventually leave us just feeling ashamed and degraded, when all the while we could have something that makes us feel pure and whole and strong and steadfast and satisfied in the presence of God. And whether we're lying or cheating or stealing or speaking maliciously about people around us or gossiping or envying or being jealous or whatever kind of sin we engage with, the choice to give into these things in and of itself begins to damage us the second we get into it. It's not just the afterflow. Because the moment we give into sin, we are turning our eyes off of the wonder and the glory of the immortal God. We're trying to find satisfaction in something that will only damage us or pull us down or bring destruction into our lives. And sometimes we think that if God really loved us, he would just let us get away with our sin. If God really loved us, he would stop challenging us to deal with this stuff. And if we push God for long enough on these things, he will do it. He will stop challenging us to grow through them. But it's not an expression of his love. Paul would remind us this is an expression of his wrath. This is an expression of God saying, you want this? Okay, I will hand you over to desires that will damage you and create chaos in your life and the lives of those around you, if this is what you really want. And all that we need to do is turn back around to God and say, Lord, I need you. Would you liberate me? Would you free me? Would you teach me how to walk with you faithfully and well? You see, I wonder, when was the last time that you or I chose not to engage with sin because we just thought of the glory of God? When was the last time that we said, I don't want or need any of that because I want to live my life in a way that will please God and show the world around me, seen and unseen, the truth that he is worthy of every part of me? When was the last time that we faced a temptation and we said, I don't want to give in to any of that because I don't want to miss 1 second's worth of intimacy with Jesus? I don't want to miss 1 second's worth of getting to know him or experience him or to walk with him more and more because he's just worth it and he's worth all of me. And you can see how this could impact and change us. Again, to be motivated not just by the love of God and not just by the fact that it's better for us, but to strengthen this by being motivated also by the wonder and the glory of who he is. You see, we live in a culture that is drowning in self-obsession, desperately longing for some kind of meaning or value or significance, something that will last all the way through. And God invites us to look and to behold the wonder of his glory. And can you imagine the hope that would flood us if we realize that our lives are not about us? All of the weight of significance does not hang on us. We have a God who cares for us and sees us and draws us forward. Can you imagine the peace that we could experience and the confidence in his presence? Can you imagine the significance that we would hold day in and day out if we realized that every part of our lives, even the bits that seem mundane and insignificant, could be sanctified by his presence as we do them with him and for him? It would revolutionize all of who we are. And so how do we grow in this? How do we become a people who are consumed by the glory of God and begin to understand and know more of him? Again, I want to suggest 3 things to us. And first of all, we need to begin where we always begin, simply asking God for it. Because the truth is we can't sum this up in and of ourselves. We can't make ourselves long for and experience and be excited about the glory of God. We just can't do it. And so we just come to God and say, Lord, would you work in me? Would you make me the kind of person who is motivated by your glory? Would you give me a glimpse of yourself that would change me? Help me to understand the awe and the wonder and the worth of who you are. Fill me with joy in your presence that is greater than all the joy and the desires that I feel and all kinds of other things. Give me a longing for yourself. And we simply start there asking him for it. But then the second thing is that we choose to pursue it. We choose to take steps to get to know the glory of God more. Again, maybe something you want to try is looking through the scripture and reading a whole bunch of visions of the glory of God and seeing how that might impact or shape or change you. Or maybe you want to try something, maybe just for this week. Every time you sit down to do your devotional reading, ask God, say, Lord, would you speak to me about who you are? I know I have all kinds of needs. I know I have all kinds of stuff I want to hear from you about me. But Lord, would you speak to me about you? Would you help me to understand who you are and see how it reorients our perspective? And for some of us, maybe this is about a conscious, ongoing choice to just prioritize our walk with Jesus. Again, I'm struck by the fact that Jesus says to us in Matthew 5, "Blessed are the pure in heart, because they will see God." And maybe for some of us, it's that beginning choice, even before we really, really feel it. Just say, God, I want to choose to resist this temptation today, because I know that you're better even if I don't feel it yet. I want to choose to pursue purity of heart so that I can see more of you. And who knows how he may want to work in us and impact us through that. Maybe it's about releasing control to God and allowing him to work in us in whatever ways he chooses. And then the third thing that we need is we need to talk about this together. I love that the Christian life never has to be lived out on our own. And so let's share our stories with one another. Let's talk to each other about what we know and experience and how we understand the wonder and the truth and the glory of God. And maybe we need to begin with the more senior among us, who've had a bit more time to process life and their relationship with Jesus, to hear from them, what do you know of the wonder of Jesus? How has your life been captivated by him? Because as we hear these stories, it does something different in our soul. It gives us a vision of reality that's broader than what we see and know day in and day out. Because the truth is that God is infinitely glorious. The weight of who he is beyond our comprehension, in wisdom and power and strength and beauty and creativity, in love and in justice. He is so far beyond the scope of what we can imagine. And our lives are meant to be lived out on this ongoing sense of motivation, certainly by the love of God for us, and certainly because it's better for us, but also to be motivated by the intensity of his glory. And so let's just take a few moments with him just to begin to process what this looks like. Let's take a few moments with God, and let's just begin by asking him, God, would you do this work in me? God, would you teach me to be someone who is motivated by your glory? Again, maybe he'll respond by giving you a glimpse of his glory. Maybe right now, maybe in the days to come, or maybe he'll minister to you in some other way, but let's just begin by asking him to do this in us. And let's take a moment and just ask him, Lord, what's the next step that you want me to take? What's your invitation for me to get to know more of your glory? And to see how God responds, what he invites you into. What might be your next step to get to know him more and experience the wonder of who he is?